You're a disgrace. If you don't know how to speak Urdu, if you don't know how to speak, I don't know, Arabic, Punjabi, Chinese, like, you come off as a disgrace. Hey guys, TazzyPhe here. How is it going? Have you ever heard the term coconut? No, not the fruit. More like...
Coconut is basically you're brown from the outside and you're white from the inside.
Or maybe you've heard the term ABCD. These are terms I heard growing up. They're basically used to describe the diaspora. If you don't know what diaspora is, no, it's not a baby rash diaper cream. It's basically the people who are scattered like crusty breadcrumbs across the globe, far, far away from the land of their mothers. So basically me and people like me. A real Pashtun woman originating from the Hindu Kush Mountains who is now settled in the hill country of the great state of Texas. Yay-how! Now, when you're part of the diaspora, in the US, people from South Asian area would be Desi, it's pretty likely that you will at some point in your life have somewhat of an identity crisis. Some cases are much worse than others, and so these terms like coconut or ABCD are used to describe us. We are confusion. Very confused. Personally, in my life, many people have said to me, "Steam, you're so white." Because of literally the stupidest reasons, like because I like hiking or because I used the word like phenomenal. I'm sorry, but I didn't realize only white people were allowed to climb mountains or use big words. I didn't know that this was engraved in our a non-existent code. Okay, and now I know, but you know what people are actually trying to say to me? They're saying that you don't act like a brown person. You're very Americanized. You're too much like them. Like you should be going to the mountain with some samosas and chai and just not walking up the mountain. You just sit and have a picnic. That's the more brown person thing to do. I'm always an outlier, okay? I never fit into these standards. And all jokes aside, although I'm not joking, there are times where it's hurtful when people say that kind of stuff. It's like they're mocking you. It's like they think that they have the authority to tell you how Pakistani you are on the scale of Pakistaniness. But it doesn't matter how poorly I speak the language. It's in my blood, okay? You can check my ancestrydna.com. Very accurate results. But in this video, I want to dive into the reasons why we look down on people who are coconuts or ABCDs. Like, why do we find the diaspora so cringy?
मैं पाकिस्तानी हूँ तुम अब पागल हो तुम पागल हो तुम ठीक है? Are you serious?
You know, why does it feel like watching us is like watching a car crash that you just can't look away from? A very light car crash. Like a nothing too serious. But I'll get into why it's so hurtful in the video later, and I'll also talk about the reasons why it's such a... But I want to switch away from talking about me, and I want to talk about someone famous who gets a lot of flack, and maybe a better example, Mindy Kaling. Mindy Kaling is an American actress, comedian, and writer, and producer, and she's best known for her role as Kelly Kapoor in The Office. She's also created and starred in her own other television shows like The Mindy Project, which I loved. Never Have I Ever. I haven't watched that one. She's also written several books. Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? I think that's the one that I read. But anyway, I mean, she's had a lot of successes. The list goes on and on. She's done a lot of movies, shows, books. And I've talked about her in another one of my videos where I talked about dating preferences, and I talk about her show, The Mindy Project. She actually gets a lot of criticism for only dating white guys in her show that she wrote and produced. And she also recently got a lot of criticism for the show Velma, where she's putting herself down, particularly for her brownness, I guess to get laughs, and people did not like that. But getting back to the main point of this video, she talks about being called a coconut, and she talks about being perceived as whitewash, as a brown person, both on her Instagram and even on her show.
No, I don't think I can date a coconut.
Is it because I'm covered in tiny hairs and I fall out of trees? That's me.
No, because you're brown on the outside and white on the inside. I gotta go.
I sound like I was born and raised in Encino, and I don't speak any Indian languages because my parents came from totally different parts of India and met each other learning English. So I didn't grow up speaking Hindi or Bengali or Tamil, although people in my life did. And because of that, I always felt really vulnerable as a kid that I wasn't, you know, Indian enough as some of my Indian friends, but I'm clearly not white, but I sound white. So For me, it was always kind of painful.
So yeah, it's a difficult thing to understand, and it doesn't really feel very good if you're the person who is the ABCD or the coconut. But I want to shift a little bit and talk about the reasons why we hate the coconuts. Why do we cringe or dislike people who are not as in touch with their roots or don't fully embrace their perceived cultural identity? So I actually have a deep answer for this question, and I'm going to get into it. But before I do that, I want to say that one answer is that no one will ever be enough for everyone. What do I mean by that? Well, I think it's all relative. It's a spectrum. If we're talking about me being Pakistani, for example, there are people that if I'm around them, I'm always going to see more Pakistani than them. And you know, those would be people who maybe have never visited Pakistan, don't have any understanding of the language, I don't know, are very far removed from it. But also vice versa. If I'm around people who lived in Pakistan or went every summer and speak perfect Urdu, I am always going to seem less Pakistani than them. So naturally, you'll never be representing your culture enough in everybody's eyes. Lily Singh actually talks about this in a recent TikTok of hers.
I get two types of comments most often. One is on TikTok, oh, now you're proud to be Punjabi? And the second one I get the most, if not more than that one, is, oh my God, I love how you always put Punjabi culture on the map. Both of those comments could not be true. You feel me?
So many people have this issue of cultural erosion. I saw this TikTok of Italians roasting an Italian American creator.
Any of you white bitches go to Italy, you better fucking say it right. It's bruschetta, not bruschetta.
E poi non è bruschetta, è bruschetta. Also, you are white too.
So, you know, speaking of cultural erosion, that is my deep answer. That is why we can't stand people who we perceive to be distancing themselves from who we think they should be or who we think they are based on what they look like on the outside. So when you see an ABCD or a coconut, what you're witnessing is an erasure of culture in real time. To some people, maybe that's a very ugly thing to look at. And frankly, it's embarrassing, okay? And that's why it feels cringy. It feels embarrassing to not know something that you should.
It's just that I feel like I'm losing my children to America. They're just going to grow up and become boring old white people.
Most of our friends are white, actually. Okay, can everybody just calm down and go back to their own conversations?
So I mentioned the phrase cultural erosion, but I didn't really talk about it. And so to define it, it's basically when the cultural practices and traditions of immigrants are gradually lost over time as they assimilate. So it's not just like this rejection of identity, you know, that's how we see it on the outside. It's a lot more complex than that, and there are different parts to it. So the first one being language shift. And I think that this is the biggest one out of all of them. Language shift happens when immigrants learn and adopt English so that they can survive and prosper in a place like America. I think losing your language feels the most embarrassing out of everything. Like, this is the hardest one for me, truly. Like, the way I feel when people make fun of my Urdu, I'm not saying that the immigrant struggle isn't real, because it is. Like, the way I feel when people make fun of my Urdu, it's not the same feeling as someone trying to learn a new language and being made fun of. Like, I don't want to belittle what it's like to be an immigrant in that experience, because I think that's much harder. But I think when it comes to language, it's definitely cuts deeper when, you know, that was my first language. So it's being made fun of for the first and only language you knew how to speak. And so it feels like it cuts deeper. As opposed to when you're learning a new language, people are more understanding. They can understand why you mess up when you're trying to learn something new, as opposed to something that someone should already know. You know, like, you're a disgrace. If you don't know how to speak Urdu, if you don't know how to speak, I don't know, Arabic, Punjabi, Chinese, like, you come off as a disgrace.
मैं पाकिस्तानी हूँ तुम अबागल हो तुम पागल हो.
Like, I know it's a joke, but as their parents, you should probably not kill their confidence by mocking their accents, just saying from experience, if you want them to speak Urdu properly. But you know what? It's just a joke, so whatever. Let's not be sensitive. The next part of cultural erosion that I want to talk about is generational differences and adaptation. To break it down, immigrant kids or children of immigrants in the US have different experiences and priorities than their parents. Like, when we look at the society and think, you know, what do we need to stay connected to? What's important? Our parents' cultures and traditions, or do we follow the American ones or do we make up our own? Like, it's a whole process. It's a whole thing happening in like real time, and we're figuring it out, and it's messy. So that can also feel cringy and embarrassing. The next one that I want to talk about is complicated, and that is marginalization. And I feel like I touch on this a little bit in my other videos, but some people lose their culture because they're living in a place that has negative stereotypes or they're made fun of for their culture. So for example, I've seen many videos about how, you know, putting oil in your hair is trendy and wellness now, right? But a lot of Desi kids grew up bullied for their hair smelling like coconut oil and being oily and whatnot. And that's just a mild example, also an example of when white people do it, that's also a reason why people's cultures die down. People want to remove themselves from it so that they can survive and prosper and be considered in. But overall, cultural erosion is a complicated process. Being a coconut or an ABCD is caused by a variety of factors. And I want to say that for most people, it's inevitable, but it's not necessarily inevitable. Like, there's many immigrant communities that preserve their culture a lot better than other places. Like, I can say that if you probably grew up in Houston, it was probably easier for you to maintain your cultural identity as a Pakistani as opposed to like someone like me who grew up in Denver, Colorado. Like, that's, you know, just a given. There are also families who make it a point that their children know the language, and that is a huge thing as well. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm trying to talk about in this video and what I'm trying to say is that when we look at people who are kind of like these watered down version, including me, watered down version of what they look like on the outside, or, you know, the culture that they're supposed to be representing. It's a lot more complicated than them just hating themselves, or it's a lot more complicated than us just becoming like white people. It's a whole complex phenomenon that many different groups go through. So yeah, these are my thoughts. I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm really bad at replying to comments, but I am going to get better at it. It's just, I have so many, nobody cares, but like the amount of things to do in a day, I really should reply to comments. But anyway, I'm gonna get better about that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope, you know, this was helpful or at least insightful, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. All right, TazzyPhe out, bye.